August 19, 1944. Deep inside the Wolf's Lair bunker complex in East Prussia, General Alfred Jodl studied intelligence briefings from the collapsing Western Front with growing confidence. His analysts had done the calculations. Allied supply chains now stretched over 400 miles from Normandy's invasion beaches to Patton's rapidly advancing Third Army. The Americans have exceeded their logistical capacity. Patton must stop within hours, maybe a day at most. No military force can maintain such advancement without proper fuel supply. From his command post at Hitler's headquarters, Jodl reviewed what every experienced Wehrmacht general knew intimately. Armored formations consumed 150,000 gallons daily during offensive operations. The Americans had pushed 400 miles from their coastal depots. The arithmetic was undeniable. Patton's forces would inevitably stall, granting the Wehrmacht precious time to consolidate along the Seine River, potentially holding positions through winter. What Jodl couldn't possibly know was that just 125 miles distant, nearly 6,000 trucks were already thundering eastward in an unbroken chain, headlights blazing in complete violation of standard military protocol, transporting 12,500 tons of material every single day. The Red Ball Express, a supply operation so audacious that German strategic thinking had never imagined such possibilities, was preparing to demolish every assumption about mechanized combat. Within 3 days, Patton's supposedly stranded armor would smash through Wehrmacht defensive positions at the Seine. Within 7 days, they would free Paris. Within 30 days, they would reach Germany's borders. The Wehrmacht's most brilliant tactical minds were about to receive an education in American supply chain management that would fundamentally alter their comprehension of contemporary warfare. Delivered by 23,000 truck operators, 75% of them Black Americans, who transformed a dedicated highway network into history's most productive military supply corridor. The German High Command's certainty in American logistical collapse stemmed from extensive military knowledge and recent battlefield observations. The Wehrmacht had pioneered lightning warfare, revolutionized combined operations, and grasped perfectly the limitations imposed by supply networks. Their own campaigns had repeatedly halted when logistics couldn't maintain pace with battlefield victories. Across Russia, the Wehrmacht's offensive had faltered, initially not from Soviet military resistance, but from basic incapacity to maintain forces across enormous distances. German vehicles broke down on Russian terrain. Horse-drawn transportation, still comprising 80% of German military movement, couldn't equal Panzer spearhead velocity. Railway compatibility issues meant supplies accumulated hundreds of miles behind frontline positions. General Heinrich von Luttwitz, who would command the 47th Panzer Corps from September onward, had written in July, "The Americans confront identical logistical impossibilities we encountered in Russia. Their mechanical superiority becomes a liability. Machinery demands fuel, munitions, replacement parts. They've pushed 400 miles within 30 days. Historical precedent teaches us what follows next: complete paralysis." German intelligence meticulously documented American consumption statistics. Individual Sherman tanks consumed half a mile per gallon on paved surfaces, considerably worse across rough country. Infantry divisions demanded 700 tons of material daily. Armored divisions required 1,000 tons. Patton commanded 12 divisions advancing across a 60-mile front. The mathematics appeared irrefutable. 12,000 tons daily, transported 400 miles from coastal areas across damaged infrastructure through a distribution network the Germans had systematically demolished during withdrawal. General Siegfried Westphal, who would become Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt in September, calculated on August 20th, even assuming the Americans possessed unlimited vehicles, which they don't, and perfect roads, which they don't, and zero mechanical breakdowns, which is physically impossible, they still couldn't maintain Patton's offensive beyond another 48 hours. Natural laws cannot be circumvented, not even by American manufacturing. At 2 p.m. on August 25, 1944, inside a commandeered French estate near Laval, Lieutenant Colonel Gordon Ayres of the Motor Transport Service addressed a chamber full of doubtful officers. The calculations they presented were stark. Patton's Third Army was burning through supplies faster than any force in recorded history, advancing at velocities that defied all logistical doctrine. Traditional supply approaches, railway delivery, scheduled convoy systems, depot-to-depot distribution, had collapsed under the pressure. "Gentlemen," Ayres declared, "we're establishing a dedicated one-way highway from Cherbourg and the beaches directly to forward positions. Every vehicle operates 20 hours daily. No halting except for refueling and emergencies. We'll transport 12,500 tons minimum daily." The designation came from railway terminology. A Red Bull freight shipment received absolute priority over everything else. The Red Bull Express would function identically. Total priority, 0 delays, no exceptions whatsoever. The operational specifications contradicted German military theory. 2 parallel unidirectional highways, one carrying loaded vehicles forward, one returning empties. 24-hour operations with full illumination, abandoning blackout protocols. No stop policy excluding fuel and mechanical breakdowns. 5-minute convoy spacing, maintaining 35 mile/hour average velocity. Mobile repair units positioned every 50 miles. Military police checkpoints removing any vehicle traveling below 25 miles hourly. Colonel Charles Thrasher, commanding the advanced section of the communications zone, reviewed projected figures. "We require 140 truck companies, 5,958 vehicles minimum, operating at 90% availability. That's impossible according to every logistics manual ever published." Yet within 36 hours, the impossible became operational. On August 26, 1944, operators from the 39 16th Quartermaster Truck Company mounted their GMC CCKW 2.5-ton vehicles, nicknamed Deuce and a Half, loaded with 105 mm artillery shells destined for Patton's guns at Mehlen, 300 miles eastward. The demographic makeup of the Red Bull Express would have astonished German racial ideologists. Among the 23,000 operators who would eventually work this route, approximately 75% were black American soldiers serving in a still segregated military. These men, prohibited from entering white establishments or using white facilities throughout much of America, were sustaining the most celebrated white general's army in motion. The operators developed their unique culture within hours. They painted messages on their vehicles. Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, here we come. Detroit to Berlin Express. They created their own traffic protocols. Slower vehicles immediately pulled aside. Mechanical failures got pushed into ditches. Any vehicle below 20 miles hourly was considered an obstruction. By August 28th, German reconnaissance elements began reporting something unprecedented. Units from Panzer Lehr Division radioed from observation positions overlooking the main Red Bull route. Continuous vehicle stream, illumination visible for 20 kilometers, no spacing, no blackout protocols. Estimate 1,000 vehicles hourly. Americans have abandoned all military caution. This contradicted everything German doctrine taught. Illumination at night invited aerial assault. Continuous columns presented perfect artillery opportunities. No spacing between vehicles meant a single disabled truck could halt entire convoys. Yet the Americans appeared unconcerned. General Edgar Feuchtinger, commanding 21st Panzer Division, personally observed the Red Bull Express from concealed locations on August 30th. His dispatch to Army Group B headquarters reflected mounting alarm. "The enemy operates a distribution network beyond our understanding. Vehicles pass at 30-second intervals day and night without interruption. They don't conceal, don't disperse, don't follow any protocols we recognize. It's not military science. It's mass manufacturing applied to combat." What the Germans couldn't grasp was that American logistics functioned on entirely different principles. Where German doctrine emphasized concealment, Americans depended on volume. Where Germans preserved vehicles, Americans assumed 20% mechanical failure and planned accordingly. Where Germans followed strict military procedures, Americans improvised constantly. The statistics achieved by the Red Bull Express defied German calculations of logistical possibility. First week, August 25th through 31st, 1944. 89,939 tons of supplies delivered. Daily average, 12,848 tons. Round-trip distance, 686 miles. Vehicle rotations 5,958 trucks making 1.5 trips daily. Fuel consumed by the operation itself 300,000 gallons. German logistics specialists captured these figures from American documentation and dismissed them as propaganda. But the figures were accurate, and they were accelerating. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had established a rhythm that seemed impossible to German logistics officers who still depended on horse-drawn wagons for 80% of their transportation. Convoys departed every 5 minutes from the western terminus. Average convoy 67 vehicles. Load per vehicle 5 tons standard, 7 tons frequent overload. Time to cover 350 miles one way, 14 hours average. Turnaround time at each terminus, 2 hours. Vehicles in constant motion, 5,000 at any given moment. The Red Ball Express generated innovations hourly as operators and mechanics solved problems German military science considered insurmountable. When trucks broke down, approximately 1,800 daily, mobile maintenance units performed repairs roadside. Mechanics developed a triage protocol, 15 minutes to repair or push it aside. Components were scavenged from vehicles deemed irreparable. Engines were exchanged in 45 minutes using mobile cranes. When the designated Red Ball route became congested, operators created alternate paths. They commandeered French buses to transport personnel and liberate trucks for cargo. They appropriated German vehicles, painting them olive drab and pressing them into service. They constructed bypasses around destroyed bridges using debris from bombed structures as roadbed. The Germans, observing this chaos that somehow produced order, couldn't comprehend it. German logistics doctrine emphasized careful planning, maintenance schedules, and proper procedures. The Americans violated every principle, yet their system accelerated rather than collapsed. The most stunning revelation for German observers was American fuel management. The Red Ball Express consumed 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily, just for its own operations, more than many German armies receive for all purposes. Yet fuel never ran short. The Americans had created a parallel marvel, Operation Pluto, pipelines under the ocean, laying fuel conduits across the English Channel. By September 1944, fuel flowed through underwater pipes German intelligence hadn't even detected. Forward fuel stations were established every 25 miles along the Red Ball route. Tanker trucks ran their own parallel convoy system, ensuring no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for refueling. General Walter Warlimont observed from aerial reconnaissance photographs. The Americans have fuel reserves larger than our entire strategic stockpiles. They burn more gasoline moving gasoline than we allocate to entire panzer divisions. This isn't warfare as we understand it. It's industrial overflow. The Red Ball Express didn't just supply Patton's advance. It multiplied its velocity exponentially. German military doctrine calculated that an armored division could sustain 20 to 30 miles advance daily under optimal conditions. Patton's divisions supplied by the Red Ball Express averaged 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. On September 1, 1944, the 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles in morning operations, halted for resupply at midday. Red Ball trucks were waiting with fuel and ammunition. They advanced another 32 miles in the afternoon. This 67-mile single-day advance shattered German defensive planning, which assumed maximum 30-mile daily advances. General Heinz Guderian, reviewing the reports in East Prussia, initially refused to believe them. No armored force can advance 60 miles daily for a week. Mechanical failures alone prevent it. This is propaganda or misidentification. But intercepted American radio traffic confirmed it. More disturbing for German commanders, the Americans were broadcasting their positions openly without encryption, supremely confident in their ability to move faster than Germans could react. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had compiled comprehensive reports on the Red Ball Express. The implications were catastrophic for Wehrmacht planning. Every assumption about American military capability required revision. The report contained observations that defied German military science. Americans wasted vehicles prodigiously, abandoning damaged trucks rather than repairing them. Operators functioned on stimulants for days, violating every principle of personnel management, no camouflage protocols, making the entire system vulnerable to air assault that never materialized. Mechanical failure rates of 30% daily, simply overwhelmed by redundancy. Fuel consumption that would bankrupt any European military. Field Marshal Walter Model's response revealed growing desperation. If these reports are accurate, we face not a superior military, but a superior civilization. They make no effort to hide because they don't fear us. They waste resources because they possess infinite resources. We cannot defeat this with military tactics. The Red Ball Express operators paid a physical price German observers couldn't see. Operators functioned for 72 straight hours, hallucinating from exhaustion and benzodrine. Accidents killed 300 operators during the Red Ball's operational period. Trucks collided in fog, overturned on damaged roads, burned when overheated engines ignited. Yet morale remained extraordinarily high. These men, mostly black Americans, denied equal rights at home, understood they were making history. They were proving Hitler's racial theories wrong with every mile driven, every ton delivered. Captured German officers provided eloquent testimony to the Red Ball Express's impact. Colonel Hans von Luck, taken prisoner in September 1944, told interrogators, "We knew we'd lost when we understood your supply system. You violate every rule, waste fuel, abandon vehicles, exhaust operators, yet succeed through sheer volume. You've industrialized warfare beyond our comprehension." The psychological impact on German forces was devastating. Wehrmacht soldiers could hear American trucks all night, every night, endless motors, endless supplies. They had 3 rounds per rifle, while Americans were bringing millions of rounds. The sound itself became psychological warfare. The vehicles themselves amazed German engineers. The GMC CKW 2.5-ton truck, the backbone of the Red Ball Express, represented mass production perfection. General Motors had produced over 500,000 of these vehicles by war's end, more trucks than the entire German military possessed of all types combined. The trucks featured innovations Germans hadn't implemented: all-wheel drive as standard, not exception, automatic tire inflation systems, waterproofing that allowed 30-inch fording, engines that ran on low-quality fuel without modification, heaters that actually worked in winter. More stunning was American maintenance philosophy. Where Germans rebuilt engines, Americans replaced them. Where Germans rationed components, Americans discarded entire vehicles for minor problems. Where Germans had master mechanics, Americans had thousands of competent mechanics who could perform 80% of repairs. As the front moved eastward, the Red Ball Express adapted with speed that stunned German planning officers accustomed to weeks of preparation for major logistics changes. When the original route to Chartres became insufficient, Americans created Red Ball Express extensions overnight. White Ball Express, Rouen to Paris, Green Diamond, Cherbourg to Railroad, transfer points, Red Lion, Bayeux to Brussels, ABC, Antwerp, Brussels, Charleroi. Each new route was operational within 48 hours of conception. German staff officers required weeks to plan similar operations. The Americans simply painted new markers, assigned trucks, and started rolling. The predominance of black American operators in the Red Ball Express created cognitive dissonance for German racial theorists. Nazi ideology declared blacks inferior, incapable of technical tasks, lacking initiative. Yet these operators were performing logistics miracles that German forces couldn't match. The black American soldiers understood the irony. They knew what the Nazis thought of them, which made them drive even harder. Every mile they drove proved Hitler wrong. They were fighting racism with truck keys, defeating Nazi ideology through superior performance. Some German prisoners forced to load Red Ball trucks as laborers found their worldview shattered by working alongside black American sergeants who calculated weight distributions faster than German engineers, who spoke better English than German English instructors, who treated prisoners fairly despite everything Nazi propaganda had told them about racial behavior. The Red Ball Express required infrastructure Germans deemed impossible to create under combat conditions. Engineers built or reinforced 40 bridges created 15 major fuel depots, established 26 maintenance stations, constructed 8 temporary cities for operators. All while the operation was running, the bridge at Montereau had been destroyed by German engineers specifically to halt American logistics. The Wehrmacht calculated replacement would require 6 weeks minimum. American engineers built a temporary bridge in 14 hours, while Red Bull convoys detoured only 8 miles on hastily bulldozed bypass roads. German engineers observed American construction methods with amazement. No planning meetings, no detailed blueprints, just immediate action. They built faster than Germans could destroy, created infrastructure that appeared overnight in French fields. One Red Ball Express achievement particularly stunned German artillery officers: ammunition supply rates that exceeded their highest theoretical calculations. American artillery units fired without restriction, a luxury no German unit had enjoyed since 1942. During the reduction of Metz fortifications in September 1944, the 19th Corps artillery fired 100,000 rounds in 24 hours. The Red Ball Express delivered every round plus 20% surplus. German artillery defending Metz was rationed to 50 rounds per gun per day. The disparity was overwhelming. American guns fired continuously for hours, while German artillery officers calculated that such bombardments required 50 truckloads of ammunition hourly. The Red Ball provided it without pause. The Red Ball Express consumed vehicles at rates that would have paralyzed any other military. By late September, mechanical attrition reached staggering proportions. Average vehicle life 10,000 miles, normal 30,000. Daily deadline rate 30% of all vehicles. Engines replaced 500 weekly. Tires consumed 10,000 weekly. Total vehicles destroyed or abandoned 5,000 plus. Yet the operation never slowed. American production had anticipated such losses. Ships arrived weekly at French ports carrying hundreds of new trucks. Replacement operators were trained in 2 days and thrown into convoys. German calculations showed Americans destroying more trucks weekly than the Wehrmacht possessed in France. Yet their transport capacity increased rather than decreased. They had achieved something Germans thought impossible: logistics faster than consumption. French civilians along the Red Ball route witnessed American abundance that contradicted years of German occupation scarcity. The psychological impact on occupied populations was immediate and profound. The Red Ball Express operators, particularly black Americans, often shared their rations with French civilians despite regulations. Every stop, children would gather and operators would give them chocolate, cigarettes, soap. The contrast with German occupation was stark. Americans gave away casually what Germans had rationed strictly. German intelligence reported the propaganda impact. French civilians now believe American victory inevitable. They cite the truck convoys as proof. Resistance activity has increased 400% along Red Bull routes. The population that accepted our occupation now actively opposes it. In early September 1944, the Red Bull Express faced its greatest challenge. Patton's Third Army had advanced so far that even the Red Ball struggled to maintain supply rates. The round trip now exceeded 700 miles. Operators were collapsing, vehicles were disintegrating. German intelligence detected the strain. General Hasso von Manteuffel reported September 8th. American supply lines show signs of collapse. Convoy intervals have increased from 5 to 15 minutes. Vehicle speed has decreased. This is our opportunity. But American adaptability again surprised the Germans. Within 72 hours, the Red Ball Express reorganized, created intermediate transfer points, cutting individual runs to 350 miles, implemented operator rotation systems, established forward maintenance bases, doubled the number of assigned vehicles. By September 12th, tonnage delivery had actually increased. The crisis that should have halted Patton only made the system stronger. Supplementing the Red Ball Express, Americans implemented another logistics solution Germans deemed impossible: large-scale aerial supply. C-47 transport aircraft began delivering critical supplies directly to forward units, each aircraft carrying 3 tons. On September 16, 1944, Wehrmacht observers counted 900 transport flights in a single day, delivering 2,700 tons by air. The Luftwaffe at its peak had managed 300 tons daily to Stalingrad and considered that a maximum effort. The Americans used transport aircraft like trucks. No fighter escort concerns, no fuel limitations. They assumed losses and overwhelmed them with numbers. The Wehrmacht couldn't compete with this industrial arithmetic. The Red Ball Express operated under command principles that violated German military hierarchy. Junior officers made decisions reserved for generals in the Wehrmacht. Sergeants commanded operations larger than German colonels managed. This decentralization baffled German observers. American logistics operated without apparent central control. Every lieutenant acted like a general, every sergeant like a colonel. Chaos should have resulted. Instead, they achieved efficiency the Wehrmacht couldn't match with rigid hierarchy. By October 1944, advancing railheads began to reduce Red Ball Express requirements. The operation that was supposed to last 10 days had continued for 82 days, delivering 412,000 tons of supplies over 122 million ton-miles. German commanders, now fighting on their own borders, reflected on what they had witnessed. Field Marshal Model wrote in his final report, "We were not defeated by American tanks or planes primarily. We were defeated by American trucks." The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics is strategy. The transition to rail transport was itself a marvel. American railroad engineers had reconstructed 1,000 miles of destroyed French rail lines while the Red Ball was running. They laid new track faster than Germans had destroyed it, often using captured German rail equipment. The final Red Ball Express statistics defied every German calculation of logistical possibility. 82 days of operation, 412,193 tons of supplies delivered, 222 million ton-miles, 5,958 vehicles average, peak 7,000, 23,000 total operators employed, 700,000 gallons of fuel consumed daily, 40,000 tons of ammunition delivered to Patton alone, 15 million rations transported, 135,000 medical supply tons. Reviewing these figures in captivity, German officers admitted they had calculated American logistics based on European precedent. They had multiplied their best performance by 3 and assumed that was American maximum. They were wrong by a factor of 10. Beyond tonnage and distance, the Red Ball Express achieved something more profound. It destroyed German faith in their own military superiority. Wehrmacht officers who had dismissed Americans as soft and mechanically dependent watched those same Americans achieve logistics miracles through determination and industrial abundance. German prisoners of war would stand silent at prison camp fences, counting passing Red Ball trucks. Some wept. They understood what it meant. Not just that Americans could supply their armies, but that they could waste more than Germans could produce. They were watching their worldview collapse, one truck at a time. The Red Ball Express forced an unexpected racial reckoning within the American military itself. The operation's success depended overwhelmingly on black American soldiers who were still segregated, denied equal treatment, and barred from combat roles. General Eisenhower, visiting Red Ball operations in September 1944, witnessed the contradiction firsthand. His aide, Captain Harry Butcher, recorded, "The general stood watching colored drivers who'd been at it for 20 hours straight. He said, 'These men are winning the war as surely as any infantry. We need to reconsider many things.'" The success created pressure for integration that contributed to military desegregation 3 years later. Black American soldiers had proved in France what they always knew. Given the tools and opportunity, they would match anyone. The Red Ball was their combat, and they won it decisively. German racial theorists struggled to explain the contradiction. SS racial science publications simply stopped mentioning American logistics operations. The evidence was too overwhelming to deny, too damaging to acknowledge. German military engineers studied Red Ball Express operations intensively after the war. The lessons revolutionized logistics thinking worldwide. Volume overcomes inefficiency. Mechanical redundancy eliminates vulnerability. Decentralized execution enables speed. Standardization multiplies capability. Human endurance has limits. but they're higher than assumed. General Franz Halder, former chief of the German General Staff, wrote in 1950, "The Red Ball Express proved logistics determines strategy, not vice versa. Americans understood this. We learned it too late." Among the 23,000 Red Ball operators, individual stories of heroism emerged that Germans found incomprehensible within their military framework. These were verified accounts from military records. Corporal John Houston drove continuously for 48 hours, delivering ammunition to 2nd Armored Division at Cambrai, falling asleep at the wheel 3 times but continuing after being revived by other operators. Private Booker Washington's truck caught fire from overheated brakes while carrying medical supplies. Instead of abandoning it as procedure required, he drove the burning vehicle 2 miles to a field hospital, jumping out as flames reached the cab. The supplies saved wounded soldiers from both armies. These stories, multiplied thousands of times, revealed American military culture to observing Germans. Individual initiative, calculated risk-taking, mission accomplishment over regulatory compliance. Desperately, German forces attempted to create their own version of the Red Ball Express in late 1944. Operation Greif during the Battle of the Bulge included plans for captured American trucks to create German supply lines. The effort failed immediately. German operators couldn't maintain American speeds. German mechanics couldn't repair American equipment fast enough. German fuel supplies couldn't sustain the consumption rates. Most fundamentally, Germans couldn't replicate the American attitude of unlimited resources. Colonel Otto Skorsny, commanding the operation, reported, "We captured 50 American trucks. Within a week, 30 were deadlined. Americans would have replaced them. We tried to repair them. That difference explains our defeat." The winter of 1944-45 provided the Red Ball Express's ultimate test. Freezing rain, snow, and ice should have stopped wheeled transport. German doctrine stated wheeled logistics became impossible below -10 degrees Celsius. Yet the Red Ball Express continued. Operators wrapped chains on tires, poured alcohol in radiators, kept rolling. Speeds dropped from 35 to 15 miles per hour, but tonnage delivery continued. German observers reported ice-covered convoys moving through blizzards that had stopped panzer divisions. The Americans had created a logistics system that functioned regardless of weather, terrain, or enemy action. It wasn't elegant or efficient by German standards, but it was unstoppable. In May 1945, captured German logistics officers were required to study Red Ball Express operations for historical records. Their conclusions were unanimous and devastating to German military pride. General Friedrich Schultz summarized, "The Red Ball Express represents warfare we never imagined. Americans created a temporary civilization. Thousands of men, thousands of vehicles, millions of tons of supplies that existed only to feed armies, then dissolved when no longer needed. We built permanent infrastructure over years. They created superior temporary systems in days." The most insightful analysis came from General Heinz Guderian, father of German armored warfare. "We invented blitzkrieg but never solved its fundamental limitation, logistics. Americans solved it through industrial excess we deemed impossible." The Red Ball Express was not a supply line, but a flowing river of material that drowned our forces. The Red Ball Express cost the United States approximately $100 million in 1944. Vehicles destroyed, fuel consumed, roads destroyed, French claims for damage. German staff officers accustomed to managing scarcity found the figure incomprehensible. Yet Americans considered it cheap. The operation enabled the capture of 400,000 German soldiers, the liberation of France, Belgium, and Luxembourg, and shortened the war by an estimated 6 months. Each day of war cost America $250 million. The Red Ball Express paid for itself in a single day of shortened conflict. Lieutenant General John Lee, commanding logistics for the European theater, stated, "We wore out 5,000 trucks and 23,000 men to destroy the German army in France. In any previous war, that would be catastrophic losses. In American industrial war, it's acceptable overhead." An unexpected consequence of the Red Ball Express was the revolutionary impact on post-war civilian logistics. Thousands of operators returned to America with experience operating the world's largest transportation network. These veterans founded trucking companies, designed interstate highways, created the modern American logistics industry. Companies like Yellow Freight, Roadway, and Consolidated Freightways were started by Red Bull veterans who applied military logistics to civilian commerce. They had learned in France that volume beats efficiency, speed beats perfection, and if you can keep trucks rolling 24 hours, you can move the world. Military historians universally recognize the Red Ball Express as the decisive logistics operation of the European theater. Without it, Patton's advance stops, Paris falls weeks later. German forces successfully establish winter defensive lines. The operation validated American military doctrine that emphasized logistics over tactics. While German officers studied Clausewitz and battlefield maneuver, Americans studied Detroit assembly lines and railroad timetables. The Red Ball Express demonstrated that in modern warfare, the ability to supply forces determines victory more than tactical brilliance. On September 15, 1944, Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, Supreme German Commander in the West, received comprehensive intelligence on the Red Ball Express. After studying the reports for hours, he summoned his staff. "Gentlemen," he announced, "we face something beyond military solution. The Americans have created a supply system that makes distance irrelevant. Our strategy assumed their culminating point where advancing forces outrun supplies. That point doesn't exist. They have revolutionized warfare, and we are fighting the last war." His operations officer, Colonel Hans Speidel, suggested interdicting the Red Bull routes with the remaining Luftwaffe. Von Rundstedt's response revealed complete understanding. "With what shall we interdict? They have 6,000 trucks. If we destroy 1,000, which we cannot, they'll replace them in a week. We'd need to destroy 200 trucks daily just to match their production. We don't have 200 aircraft total." Behind the statistics were human stories that revealed American character to German observers. Operators who hadn't slept for 3 days, refusing relief because their trucks might not make it through. Mechanics working in freezing rain to keep convoys rolling. Teenagers lying about their age to drive trucks. Such stories multiplied throughout the operation, created a mythology that demoralized German forces. The Americans were not soft as propaganda claimed. They drove themselves harder than Germans drove horses, but they did it voluntarily, not from fear. This made them more dangerous than German doctrine had understood. The Red Ball Express became unintentional propaganda more powerful than any planned operation. German soldiers could hear the convoys at night, endless streams of motors that never stopped. The sound itself became psychological warfare. German units reported hearing ghost convoys that demoralized troops as effectively as actual logistics. The knowledge that Americans had unlimited supplies while Germans rationed their last ammunition created despair that undermined combat effectiveness. American psychological warfare units recognized the impact. They began broadcasting truck engine sounds toward German lines when actual convoys weren't present. German units reported these phantom convoys as real, demonstrating the psychological damage the Red Ball Express had inflicted. In November 1944, with rail lines partially restored, the Red Ball Express was officially discontinued. But its methods had revolutionized military logistics permanently. The concept of continuous, high-volume, wasteful but effective supply became American military doctrine. The final innovation was the speed of dissolution, the massive operation. 23,000 men, 6,000 vehicles, hundreds of installations, disappeared in 72 hours. Troops reassigned, vehicles redistributed, routes returned to civilian use. Germans required months to create smaller operations and years to dissolve them. Americans built what they needed, used it, discarded it, built something better. When German generals surrendered in May 1945, many cited the Red Bull Express specifically as demonstrating the hopelessness of continued resistance. General Hasso von Manteuffel stated at his interrogation, "When we understood your logistics capacity, we knew the war was lost. You could supply armies faster than we could destroy them. The Red Bull Express was a weapon against which we had no defense." Field Marshal Albert Kesselring, among Germany's most competent commanders, was asked what most surprised him about American forces. His answer, not your tanks, not your planes, but your trucks. The Red Ball Express showed us that you had militarized your entire society's production capacity. We were fighting your factories, not just your soldiers. The final statistics of the Red Ball Express stand as testament to American industrial warfare. Total cargo delivered 412,193 tons. Total distance covered 122 million ton miles. Trucks employed 5,958 daily average, 7,000 peak. Operators involved 23,000 total, operating days 82. Fuel consumed 57 million gallons. Tires worn out 180,000. Vehicles destroyed 5,000 plus. Cost $100 million. German divisions defeated through supply advantage 47. Estimated war days shortened 180. These numbers tell a story that transcended military operations. They represent the moment when warfare changed forever, when industrial capacity became more important than tactical brilliance, when logistics determined strategy rather than serving it. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the United States Postal Service issued a commemorative stamp honoring the Red Ball Express at the National Postal Museum in Washington. The ceremony recognized the operation that had been overshadowed by combat operations but proved equally decisive in Allied victory. Veterans who attended spoke of their pride in an operation that proved American industrial might and individual determination could overcome any obstacle. They had driven through exhaustion, through mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. They were black soldiers mostly, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition during the war, but they had delivered victory at 35 miles per hour. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics is not support, it is the main effort. The operation demonstrated that industrial democracy could mobilize resources on a scale that totalitarian efficiency couldn't match. German generals who had laughed at American logistics were silenced by 6,000 trucks, delivering 12,500 tons daily across 700 miles of liberated France. They had assumed Americans would follow European precedent, conserve resources, advance cautiously. Instead, Americans created a logistics tsunami that drowned German forces in Allied abundance. The operation's success came not from military genius, but from American characteristics Germans never understood: industrial excess, mechanical aptitude, improvisational skill, and most importantly, the initiative of individual soldiers who made independent decisions that in the Wehrmacht would require field marshal approval. In his memoirs, General George Patton, whose Third Army was the primary beneficiary of the Red Ball Express, wrote the ultimate tribute. The truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserved as much credit for the defeat of Germany as any combat unit. They drove through exhaustion, through mechanical failure, through weather that stopped armor. Without them, the Third Army doesn't move. Without movement, we don't win. They were black soldiers mostly, segregated, discriminated against, denied recognition. But they won the war as surely as any rifleman. History must record this truth. That truth stands as the final testament to the Red Ball Express. 23,000 mostly black American operators operating 6,000 trucks on a one-way highway to victory achieved what German military science declared impossible. They supplied advancing armies faster than physics should allow, maintained tempo beyond human endurance, proved that in modern warfare, the side with the most trucks beats the side with the best tactics. The German generals had laughed at American logistics, dismissing it as wasteful, undisciplined, impossible to sustain. 82 days later, those same generals surrendered to armies supplied by the Red Ball Express, finally understanding that American trucks had defeated German tanks, that industrial abundance had overwhelmed military excellence, that logistics had become strategy. The Red Ball Express ended on November 16, 1944, but its impact echoed through military history. It proved that in the industrial age, victory belongs not to the bravest soldiers or brightest generals, but to the nation that can deliver the most supplies, the fastest, the farthest. The German generals who laughed at American logistics in August 1944 signed surrender documents in May 1945, defeated by 23,000 truck operators who revolutionized warfare at 35 miles per hour. Their story deserves its place among the great military operations of history. Not because it was elegant or efficient, it was neither, but because it worked. The Red Ball Express kept Patton rolling, kept the Germans retreating, proved that in modern war, the convoy of trucks matters more than the column of tanks. The highways of France still bear the scars of the Red Ball Express. Ruts worn by overloaded trucks, bridges hastily repaired, roadsides littered with abandoned vehicles. But the greatest monument to the operation is the speed of Allied victory. Every day the war shortened saved thousands of lives. The Red Ball Express shortened it by months. In the end, the German generals who laughed at American logistics learned the hardest lesson of modern warfare. Amateurs talk tactics, professionals talk logistics, and Americans talk trucks. The Red Ball Express was America talking very loudly indeed in the roar of 6,000 engines that never stopped, carrying democracy and destruction at 35 miles per hour down a one-way road to victory. The last word belongs to a German officer whose name is lost to history, quoted by a Red Ball operator at the 1994 commemoration. Standing beside a road in Belgium, watching the endless convoy of American trucks, the officer said in accented English to his captors, "We prepared for everything. Your tanks, your planes, your ships. We never prepared for your trucks. How do you defeat an enemy who has more trucks than you have soldiers?" The answer rolled past him at 5-minute intervals, driven by exhausted Americans who were rewriting the rules of warfare, one delivery at a time. The Red Ball Express had made logistics into strategy, supply into victory, and trucks into the most decisive weapon of the European war. The German generals stopped laughing when they understood this truth, but by then Patton was already at their gates, supplied by the greatest logistics operation in military history.